Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you once again. We're off of I believe, a 5-3 weekend and a 2-2 day yesterday, which should have been better than it was. Although the 2-2 was actually a slight win for me because the Giants' money line hit. So it was, like a really small win of probably like $9 or $10. Isn't that just great? It should have been a lot better than it was. It started off 0-2 and in a really ridiculous manner, a very frustrating manner. I just had to pop that thing back on. Sorry if that hurts your ears. The Jets in that London game, I mean, I got one part of the handicap right, or probably most of it really, which was that the Jets defense was going to be able to hold Minnesota's offense in check, and they did. Minnesota only had one offensive touchdown, I believe. I don't think Darnold had any touchdown passes, and he threw for fewer than 200 yards, I believe. So the Jets defense held up their end of the bargain, but the Jets got themselves in a hole almost immediately. I think Aaron Rodgers at some point threw an interception, a pick six, in Minnesota territory. So, I mean, that's... People make fun of me because I say that that's like fluke bullshit. Yeah, it is unpredictable that you have a team that's driving into the opponent's territory and then they throw a pick six, and instead of it being like... It looked like it was going to be at least 3 for the Jets at that point, and instead, no, it goes back the other way for 6, 7. I mean, it swings the entire game. It's bullshit. I mean, the Jets were able to still get back into that game, and they actually got back to within 3 in the fourth quarter. Their defense was keeping them in the game, like I said, and then they got down 6 again, had one final drive, one final shot. They drove into Minnesota territory again, and Aaron Rodgers threw another interception, probably inside the red zone, I think is where it happened. I don't know if the play started in the red zone, but I think the pick happened inside the 20 when they're driving for a potential game-winning touchdown there. It's just, man, I mean, that one was pretty hard to take. I would have to go look at the box score, but I think the Jets did actually outgain Minnesota in that game, and they lost the turnover battle 3-2. It was an ugly game in London, which, again, I thought it was going to be a pretty ugly game, which is why I also liked taking the points, and it's also more the Jets' style of game. What can you do, man? And Sam Darnold, I mean, he is human. Everybody's hailing him as like the MVP already. Like I said, it's been like a team effort from Minnesota, and Sam Darnold has not been like a one-man machine there, really. I mean, he's had at least 3 of his games. I think he's gone under. I think he's gone under 300 yards passing in every single game, and I think in 3 of them he might have gone under 200 yards passing. I'd have to look. I think at least 2 times that has happened. So. And unfortunately for my fantasy team, I'm really screwed because Aaron Jones got hurt in the game, and I have him and Achane, and they both went down yesterday. So my fantasy team in my main league off to a 3-1 start. It's going to be 3-2 now. You can't do anything when 2 of your running backs basically die on the field early in the game. So that's just great as well. I'm not going to keep ranting about fantasy football, though, but maybe you think it's funny. I don't know. Maybe it's entertaining for me to be doing that. And Aaron Rodgers did also get hurt in that London game as well, though he didn't come out of the game, but he was not quite right. I mean, everybody's going to keep making fun of him. I hate that it's all like political because everybody hates him because he refused the vax and whatever, which obviously I think is badass. I like Rodgers more for sticking to his guns. But I think he like sprained his ankle in the game or something. It didn't look great from what I could tell. He was down on the ground, but he stayed in the game and threw another interception. So that's just awesome. But I don't think the Jets have anybody who can even replace him by any stretch. So I don't know. Let's, I guess we'll talk about, I was going to talk about the other games yesterday. Oh man, this is going to be a long rant about yesterday's losses. The Bengals one was even worse. The Bengals were winning basically that whole game against the Ravens. I'd chalked that up as a win already. They were winning by 10 in the fourth quarter with like 8 minutes left. I'm like, yep, it's going to be a win for the Bengals. Joe Cool is back, man. Joe Burrow, I've been making fun of his stupid bleached hair. Looks like he's going to get a second win in a row. He's got 5 touchdowns in the game. Huge performance out of him against what is a pretty good Ravens defense. Joe Burrow was able to pick them apart. Up, 38-28 in the fourth quarter or something. And then I believe they were in... Well, I'm trying to remember exactly what the sequence of events here was, but I don't know how many times Cincinnati turned it over, but I know the Ravens eventually got into scoring range. They got a touchdown. They cut it to 3, and then the Bengals went on a drive into Ravens territory. Bengals were up 3 pretty late with, I think, 3 minutes left in the game at that point, and they were at least going to get a field goal to push it back to 6. And Joe Cool throws a horrendous interception at that point, a key interception in the game. Basically, that was one of the turning points in the game. They're probably going to win the game if he didn't do that. Instead, he gives it back to Baltimore. They're able to go down, get into field goal range, kick a game-time field goal, send it into overtime. Then I think both teams had possession in overtime and didn't score, or at least I know Baltimore didn't score right away. I don't know who had the ball first. Maybe it was Baltimore, and they took like a decent amount of time off the clock. So maybe it was just Baltimore had it first, didn't score, and then it was Cincinnati's turn, because I know that when I started watching it again, Cincinnati got down into range for a long field goal. But Evan McPherson, he's been pretty good, man. He's been good at clutch field goals as well. He's one of the better kickers in the league. They kick a pretty long field goal, so it's not a guaranteed field goal. I think it was like probably around 50 yards. But what happened on that? The holder fucked it up. And I was making Ray Finkel jokes, man, on Twitter. Laces out, man. I mean, you watch what happened on that play. The snap looked fine. The holder basically fumbled the ball, had to put the ball up, didn't have time to really like place it the way that he wanted to. Had to just do it, had to kick it, and McPherson shanked the kick base. And it wasn't even that bad of a shank. He still got the distance on it, I think, but it was wide. And you watch that replay, man, it was a bad hold. So the potential game-winning field goal, a makeable field goal for a guy like McPherson, that goes wrong. And then, of course, you know what's going to happen after that. Baltimore Ravens get pretty good field position, and they go down and they get a game-winning field goal. That is just brutal. But then I was able to go 2-0 in the later games. We get the New York Giants winning outright, which not a misleading result there, in my opinion. The Giants are winning all game. They won the yardage battle. They put up a lot of yards, actually. I said that Seattle may be a little bit overrated, and of course the spot was just horrible. It was that weird, like, condensed sandwich spot for Seattle, and it showed. It was a situation that I don't think I've ever even seen before in like 20 years of doing this in the NFL almost. That was a mega sandwich spot. It was worse than any sandwich spot I had ever seen. I'm like, Giants, let's go, baby. And it got up to 7, I think, because of the Giants' injuries. Didn't even matter. Malik Neighbors, Devin Singletary not there. Who cares, baby? It's Daniel Jones time. And Seattle, actually, the Giants' defense actually doesn't look that bad. They played well in that game. And Seattle actually didn't even have an offensive play run in the red zone until the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. They had not run a single play in the red zone until then, which is an insane stat. Their one touchdown that they had prior to that was a 100-yard fumble 6 on a play where it looked like the Giants had actually gotten a touchdown and crossed the plane, but it was ruled that he did not cross. I forget who the ball carrier was, but it was ruled that he did not cross the plane. He fumbled it, and Seattle took it back 100 yards the other way for a touchdown. So a ridiculous, 14-point swing on that one play there. And it still didn't even matter, really. The Giants were still, like, dominating the game pretty much, and they still had the lead for, like, the whole thing. And then it got a little dicey at the end. I mean, the Giants' cover, I think, was never in doubt at this point at the end. The Giants had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. Seattle finally got a touchdown. And then, yeah, it got a little bit dicey with, I think the Giants had to punt it over one more time. Seattle had one more shot at it. They got into range for a long potential game-time field goal. And, yeah, you know how that works out. Well, I mean, Myers is a good kicker there on Seattle, too, so I was worried. It was like, I thought he was going to make it and it was going to go into overtime. But at that point, you know that the worst-case scenario, if it goes into overtime, is that Seattle gets the ball first and they only get 6, so they're not going to cover the 7. You know, so because overtime, if you get the ball first and you score a touchdown, it's over and you don't kick the extra points. So the cover was done at that point, but I'm greedy, man. I wanted the money line because that money line is what gave me a winning day instead of a losing day. It would have been a small losing day if it didn't happen, but I'd prefer to take the slight win over the slight loss, obviously. And what happened? The Giants blocked the kick and they returned it for a touchdown just to make it look ridiculous. And I think they went for 2 on it. I think they probably went for a 2-point conversion. Well, they must have, because the Giants don't have a kicker, right? I know they lost Graham Gano. I don't know who they replaced him with. Well, I guess they probably have some kicker now because he got injured in that game. They didn't have a backup kicker in that game. They must have signed somebody. I don't know, but I think it was more of a case of they wanted to go up. I don't even know. I don't know why they would have gone for 2 there. I didn't see what happened there. I saw the touchdown. I started celebrating, and then I didn't see what happened. So I don't know why they didn't get the extra point there because it should have pushed it to a 10-point lead. And instead, I'm looking at it's a 9-point lead. Maybe they missed the extra point because their kicker that they got off the street basically just didn't do a good job. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know. You can let me know about that. Let's talk about today's card. Oh, and I won on the San Diego Padres last night too, man. Nice kind of easy win there. I handicapped the starting pitching matchup right. Jack Flaherty didn't do well, and then he got in a verbal altercation with Manny Machado. I mean, there was things going on in that game, man. Just a lot of yelling back and forth. Flaherty not with the performance to really back it up, even though he struck out Machado at one point. Profar had one play where he robbed Mookie Betts of a home run out in left field and pretended like he didn't catch the ball just to troll everybody. And seems like some people got upset about that too. And eventually Dodgers fans were throwing stuff at Fernando Tatis Jr. because I guess he was gyrating and like hip thrusting at them and and taunting them out in the outfield there. And it was crazy, man. And the game had to be suspended at one point because of the Dodgers fans started pulling a New York Yankees Game 6 of the ALCS 2004. You can go look that up if you don't remember that. That was the Schilling Bloody Sock game and the Mark Bellhorn home run that was a reverse call, reverse to the correct call that it was a home run. That game and the A-Rod glove slap out of a Royals glove, all of that happened in that one game, and the Yankees fans started throwing crap onto the field, and they had to bring out a SWAT team. Dodgers fans started doing that last night and throwing stuff onto the field because they were mad at Tatis for doing what he was doing out in the outfield and whatever, and getting frustrated because San Diego was blowing their team out and whatever it was, man. And yeah, that game got delayed. A SWAT team came out. I don't know what was going on, man. And then there was some delay in the Pittsburgh Steelers game against the Cowboys last night, too. I don't know what that was because I wasn't watching it at that point, but there was some big-time delay in that game because I looked and I was like, how is it only halftime and it's like midnight? I don't know what was going on there. Urjo, yeah, I mean, NHL, we're going to talk about it tomorrow. We have my Bruins are playing tomorrow and the debut of the Utah Hockey Club, the UHC, baby, tomorrow. I'll talk about it on tomorrow's show, although hopefully it's not a huge card. It shouldn't be a huge card tomorrow, but I know NHL is starting with, I think, 3 games tomorrow, and we have the start of Tuesday college football, and it's not the MAC. Usually it's the MAC that does the Tuesday games, but it's some other conference. There's some college football games, or I don't know what it is, but yes, I'll start talking about it. I haven't decided if I'm going to have a play on any of the hockey tomorrow or not. I got to look into it. Let's talk about today's card. We only got 3 games, so hopefully I can do this before I get out of here. I don't have any plays on these. We'll talk about the ALDS games here. Detroit, Cleveland is first up. All of these are battles of lefties, man. Every starter is a lefty. That's wild. This is Tarek Skubal. It's his turn yet again for Detroit because you see these teams that went through the wild card series have lined it up so their number 1 starter gets to pitch game 2 of the of the DSs, I should say. Detroit's public was 72% of the tickets because at this point the public, they know who Skubal is, man. They know he's good, and they're not going to jump on Matthew Boyd, even though it is Cleveland, and Cleveland won the first game easily. And speaking of winning easily, I forgot to finish that thought. San Diego Padres won really easily. That was 4-1 late in the game. They wound up extending the lead to 10-1, and then it wound up 10-2, I think, with a lot of late runs. Just San Diego just pouring it on at the end. Anyway, back to this. Yeah, Skubal, 72% of the tickets, 86% of the cash, though. Looks like it's on Detroit. Detroit's up from down from -125 to -124, but they're a road favorite in this game. So that's the odds makers telling you they think this is a pretty big pitching mismatch because Cleveland is not going to be an underdog at home against Detroit in like any other starting pitching situation unless it's Skubal against like one of Cleveland's worst starters. And that's what we're looking at here. But both of these starters are basically green as far as like what they've done in the playoffs. So it's kind of an interesting situation. I believe Skubal, he only has 1 start in the playoffs now, and that was his start this year against Houston, which, of course, he had a 6-inning shutout, and it was a really nice performance from Skubal. So I think that probably gives Skubal a little bit of an extra edge because he now has a postseason game under his belt. You kind of get that nervousness out of the way. You get back in your rhythm. You get used to it. He's pitching on schedule. So I think it lines up pretty well for Skubal. And of course, he had a great season, 2.39 ERA, 0.92 whip. One of the best pitchers in baseball for sure. Against Cleveland, his numbers are actually not as good as you would expect in some aspects. 62 at bats, 15-3 strikeout walk ratio looks pretty good, but a 274 batting average is a little bit higher than you'd expect out of him. A couple of Cleveland's best hitters have hit him pretty decently, but he has held them to a fairly low 663 OPS because he's held the walks down, he's held the extra base hits down, hasn't allowed a home run. So pretty good OPS against them and a slightly high batting average allowed to them. So I wouldn't say that Skubal is bad against them, but he's not dominant against them. And then on the other side, you have, Matthew Boyd, who is a 33-year-old pitcher, but I looked this up, and he's only made one appearance ever in the postseason, and it was like a few years ago, and it was as a relief pitcher. He only pitched a third of an inning, and he didn't do very well in it. I think he didn't allow any runs, but I think he walked a guy and allowed like a hit or something, so it wasn't an impressive performance. He's been around for a while, but just hasn't gotten a lot of playing time, really, so he is new to the playoffs as well, but I think for him, we don't know how long he's going to go in this game. I mean, I think that's also a question mark. He's been pitching pretty well, but he's been making some kind of shortened starts, but maybe towards the end of the season, they were shortening his workload to get him ready for the playoffs. I don't really know what the deal is because he had a lot of shorter starts in his last few outings. Didn't do that well in a couple of them either. The last few outings, he gave up 4, 3, and 2 earned runs in shortened starts, so that wasn't good, but his stats before that were pretty good. But then you look at his season, yeah, he's got a 2.72 ERA and 1.13 whip, and he was actually mostly starting, but he didn't even appear in a game this season until August 13th, so he had a really short season. So we're looking at a really small sample size here. I was surprised at how well he did when he played this year because his career stats don't indicate he should be this good. 4.85 ERA and 1.31 whip over his career. That's not good. Strikeout rate, not really that high. Fewer strikeouts than the amount of innings pitched. Somewhat high walk rate, I would say. Not that high, but his stats aren't really that good over his career and don't really indicate that he should be this good. Detroit has basically no history against him, though, with Riley Green. Riley Green being the only... I usually shrink my window here because I have an ultra-wide monitor, so when I have the window... like completely widened, it actually is smaller and it looks worse on my screen, so my apologies there. Riley Green is 0 for 1 off him lifetime, and other than that, Detroit has never seen him before. So does that mean Boyd has a little bit of an edge because he hasn't been seen before by Detroit? Maybe. I mean, that is a thing. When an opposing lineup is not familiar with an opposing pitcher, they do tend to be at a slight disadvantage. So this game's hard for me to read, man, because Skubal is obviously the better pitcher. He has more playoff experience now just because he has that one game under his belt. Boyd has more career experience, but his career numbers are way, way worse. Like, he's obviously not the better pitcher. So it's a weird mix of things here. So I'm not playing this game. I'm not playing the side. Boyd, he is unfamiliar to Detroit, so that might help him to pitch a little bit better in this game. I don't want the side, and I don't really want the total either. The total's gone down from 6.5 juice to the under to 6 juice to the over. So this is one of those playoff totals where they put it out really low with an ace pitcher like Skubal on the mound. That's an extremely low total, man, where if you want to play the under here, you basically have no room for error. So it seems a bit dangerous. 87% of the tickets are on the over, though, and 72% of the cash. So it looks like the over is actually public here. Maybe the public, even though they know Skubal is good, maybe they're thinking this total is actually too low and it looks too dangerous, but I actually think it looks too dangerous too. So based on Skubal not totally dominating Cleveland and Cleveland's offense being pretty good and Boyd not being that good, I'm actually wondering if leaning towards an over actually might make more sense here. But Cleveland, I mean, their bullpen is actually one of the better bullpens in baseball. They had one of the better bullpen ERAs, so full game over. Not really something I want to do either, especially if Skubal is putting together another gem. I mean, it could be a game that gets pretty close to this total and you're just sweating it out. I don't want to deal with it, obviously. It's really hard for me to gauge this one. Maybe actually an over in the first 5 innings would actually make sense here just because the starting pitching matchup maybe a little bit worse than it looks like. Skubal might actually give up a couple of runs there, and Boyd obviously has the potential to be worse than what his season ERA looks like. So you'd probably be playing over like a 3 or something like that in the first, maybe even less than 3 in the first 5 innings. So I don't know. And then the other game we got is Kansas City, New York. The Yankees are down from -150 to -147, and they are public. 68% of the tickets, 71% of the cash. Of course, we're looking at a situation where Cleveland and New York have both won the opening games of the series, so they're both up 1-0. I don't know if that matters that much, but it does mean that maybe the team that's down 0-1 might have a little bit of extra motivation here. But it's also a situation where the team that's down 0-1, like I said, in both cases, because they pitched, they had their pitchers have to go in the wild card round. They actually have their aces lined up in these games against some inferior pitchers for the other team. So Skubal and Reagans are actually the aces of their individual staffs, and they're actually the 2 better pitchers in these games. So the Yankees are public. Looks like more of the ticket percentage is on or the cash percentage, is on them, but the line looks like it's moved down on the Yankees as well. So kind of hard for me to read the side on this one, and the total has gone down a little bit from 7.5 juice to the over to 7.5 juice to the under. I actually agree with the move to the under in this one. 81% of tickets on the over and 53% of the cash on the under. So it looks like a pros versus Joes split here, where the public wants the over. Game 1 went fairly significantly over, and I mentioned I kind of leaned to the over in that first game. I actually like the under in this one. Out of these 2 games, I actually think my favorite way to go would be to go either under in this game or under in the first 5 innings in this game, because a lot of it is dependent on the starting pitching matchup. But remember, this is also a situation where all these teams were off yesterday. So we got rested bullpens coming into all these games because none of these teams played yesterday. So none of the teams had to use any relief pitchers yesterday. So the bullpens are basically pretty much fully at these teams' disposal today. So that under could make sense. And you're getting a little bit of a higher total on this one because it's the Yankees offense, because the first game was an over game. It's in Yankee Stadium, which is a hitter's park, and Rodon, not really a very good pitcher necessarily, so some things kind of indicating that this game should be a little bit higher scoring. But like I said, I actually agree to the under, but a lot of that handicap is the starting pitching matchup, where I actually think that the starting pitching matchup is pretty conducive to an under. So first 5 inning under might make sense, but you're probably having to play it at a pretty low, you're probably having to pay a price for it, I should say. It's a pretty low total in the first 5 innings. I would imagine like 3.5. So it's getting a little bit dicey there too, because if one guy makes like 1 or 2 mistakes, you're looking at that potentially not happening and not staying under. Cole Reagans, really nice stats on the season: 3.14 ERA, 1.14 WHIP. I believe this might be his first postseason start here, which he does have 1 this season. So again, Reagans and Skubal, they're both the aces of their teams, and they both actually have that 1 game under their belt already. So they both pitched once already in the playoffs. So they actually have a little bit of an edge in that respect too, because they both have actually pitched once already in the playoffs. So that might be a little bit of an edge to them as well, because they've gotten that game out of the way. They're back on schedule, whereas the pitchers that they're facing in these games are actually pitching on extended rest, and they have not pitched in a playoff game yet. So I actually think a little bit of an added edge in that respect to both Skubal and Reagans here. And Reagans did basically what Skubal did in his first postseason game at Baltimore. He had a 6-inning shutout, so he also had a really good outing. Didn't even walk anybody in that one, so he looked good. Again, he's been really good on the season: 3.14 ERA, 1.14 WHIP, and against the Yankees in 21 at-bats, he's done really well. But remember that this was when the Yankees had never seen him before, so the Yankees have at least seen him before now, so they'll be a little bit more familiar with him. But he's a good pitcher, man, and in 21 at-bats, he held them to 2 hits, although he walked them 4 times. 8-4 strikeout walk ratio. Half of the walks, 2 of them were Jazz Chisholm Jr., though. But he's held the Yankees to an .095 batting average and .478 OPS. Granted, again, some of it was when the Yankees had never seen him before, and we only have 21 at-bats to look at here. It might actually be just 1 start for him here, but still, he was really good in that start. So the Yankees offense has not been successful against Cole Reagans, and he's just a really good pitcher, man. So I think Reagans probably is likely to continue being fairly successful. Carlos Rodon, on the other hand, I mean, I don't think he's as good, but his numbers this season aren't bad. 3.96 ERA, 1.22 whip. He pitched well down the stretch as well with a 2.2 ERA in September, kind of bouncing back from a couple of months that weren't as good with ERAs over 4 in July and August. Came back with a bounce back. He faced Kansas City in September on September 9th, so they are recently familiar with him to some extent. But he had a decent outing in that one, 9-1 strikeout walk ratio, only allowed 2 hits, 2 earned runs on 2 home runs, though, 5 hits in 6 innings. Against Kansas City overall, they have 101 at-bats off him, so they have a big sample size, and he's done really well. 32-8 strikeout walk ratio, holding him to a 228 batting average and 641 OPS. So in that big a sample size, I do think that's an indicator. And Kansas City's offense has just really struggled on the road, man, even though they did well in game 1 of this series, and they had chances to win that game. It was a crazy back-and-forth game and a 7-6 Yankees win, whereas Cleveland dominated their first game, so maybe that'll be like more of a zigzag scenario in the Detroit-Cleveland one, and Detroit will get a little bit more motivated. So if you forced me to pick a side in the Detroit one, I would lean slightly to Detroit just because I like them in the starting pitching matchup. Maybe Detroit first 5 inning. In this one, I do lean to the Kansas City side slightly, and also to them in the starting pitching matchup. I actually like Kansas City maybe more in the full game in this one, surprisingly enough, because the starting pitching matchup looks like kind of a wash, which is actually why I like the under, because both pitchers have actually done well against these opposing hitters. So I actually like the under, and I like the under in the first 5 innings in that game as well. So those are my leans in those ones, but nothing very strong at all there. But the market indicators look the strongest on the under in that game in KC and Yankees. So that's the way I lean there. And then, of course, we have Monday Night Football, which I did talk about already on my NFL video, but I can add some added detail in this. This is Saints-Chiefs. The market indicators are still the same as when I talked about this the other night. Chiefs down from 6.5 to 5.5. I think some of that is just due to the injuries that they have. The injuries, when combined, they've kind of added up to the Chiefs losing a point off of the point spread because they are injured, man. They basically have nobody surrounding Patrick Mahomes at this point. They're down Rashee Rice. I think they're down one of their other. I think Hollywood Brown maybe is not playing either. I think they're both out. Isaiah Pacheco is out, so they're going to be with some backup running back tandems going on here. They're going to elevate Xavier Worthy, who is really fast. He's a pretty talented rookie. He's going to be elevated to their number 1 wide receiver in this one, but it is still Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid there, man, and they still have Travis Kelce there, so I don't necessarily see the Chiefs taking that much of a step back offensively, and they're not really an offensive team anymore, man. They're more of a defensive team. They're more of a strategy team, and it works out well for them. So I don't know that those offensive injuries are going to really downgrade the Chiefs that much, to be honest. They do have 71% of the cash on them, even though the public's coming in to the tune of 62% on the Saints. I think the public's looking at this and seeing the Chiefs have not been blowing teams out this year. The Saints have 2 huge blowouts earlier in the season so far. It was their first 2 games, which we'll talk about in a second. So the Saints offense looks like the much better offense, and I think that's why the public is on the Saints here, because the Saints look like the higher scoring team, even though they haven't been as good in the last 2 games. The Chiefs haven't put up high point totals in any of their games, and they haven't won any game by more than 7. So yeah, I mean, it is dangerous to lay the point spread with the Chiefs here, and I'm not going to lay the points, but if you forced me to pick a side, I would actually lean to the Chiefs, just because it looks like the market is pretty strongly indicating in that direction right now. And the Saints, to me, look like a public underdog in this game. So I don't want anything to do with public underdogs. But because the Chiefs are a defense-oriented team and they don't score a lot, it is definitely risky to lay the points with them. But I think there are reasons why the Saints offense could be kind of in trouble in this game and have another struggling offensive performance in this one, other than the fact that the Chiefs probably are the best defense they've faced so far this year. The Chiefs are a pretty good defense. The Saints, I mean, looking at their schedule, man, I mean, they had those 2 monster blowouts early in the season, but it was against Carolina and Dallas, and Carolina's offense was making a ton of mistakes. Carolina's defense is not good. Dallas, their defense is not good either. So New Orleans did that against 2 very vulnerable defenses, and then against a couple of somewhat better defenses in Philadelphia and Atlanta, who have okay defenses at the very least. New Orleans took a major step back, but the other thing that happened here is New Orleans lost probably their best offensive lineman, their center, McCoy, I think is his name, which is something that nobody's really paying attention to. They lost him, and all of a sudden the pressure that Derek Carr was under went way, way up in those last two games. So I think McCoy being out matters, and they actually have a cluster injury situation on the offensive line now. McCoy is still not going to be back in this one. I'm pretty sure it's either McCoy or McCord. I forget his name. You can go look it up, but their center, he's like a Pro Bowl center. They lost him after game 2, and their offense took a significant downgrade, even though, yes, they stepped up in the caliber of defense that they were facing. I think it was a combination of both of those things, and I think their offensive line is a problem right now, man. They're giving up way more pressure with him out of there. They have a couple other offensive linemen who are injured as well, so it's not looking very good on the offensive line for New Orleans here, so I think they could also struggle against a pretty good Kansas City defense. You could see Derek Carr be under duress in this one as well, and you could see the Saints' offensive woes continue in this game. So I think that is also kind of part of the reason why I lean to Kansas City a little bit, but I also like the under a little bit more than the side in this one. But if you're looking at the under, I mean, I'll talk about it in 1 second, but I think you've lost value on the under at this point, so I don't really want to do that either. But as far as the side, the scheduling situation, the Saints are in a tougher spot, in my opinion. They're coming off a couple big games. That was a big, close divisional matchup at Atlanta where they lost right at the end, I think, on a Younghoe Koo field goal right near the end there. Now they're having to go to Arrowhead on a second straight road game in 2 weeks. Not a very easy spot for the Saints to be in, even though I guess they're actually 3-1 against the spread and 2-2, I think, I think 2-2 straight up at Arrowhead, but going all the way back to the late 90s. So totally different personnel here now. So I don't think there's anything you can really take away from that. But the Saints haven't done that bad at Arrowhead in their history, but still, this is a tough spot, a second straight road game, and it's also sandwiched in between 2 division games, and it's an out-of-conference game. But to kind of counter that a little bit, just to play devil's advocate with myself, it is also a Monday night game in Arrowhead, so it's not like you're going to just overlook the Chiefs, but it's more of a matter of how tired are the Saints going to wind up being in a situation like this, facing 2 fairly decent defenses in a row, both on the road, back-to-back. It's not the easiest spot, whereas Kansas City, I think they're in a better spot to bounce back. They had a really just pretty miserable performance against the Chargers in the last game. So I think they're in more of a bounce-back spot here. They're coming back from 2 straight games on the road. I think it'll be better for them to be back at home. And I think they should be in a bounce-back spot because they got a scare from the Chargers as a 7-point road favorite, a game that they feel they should have won more easily probably. They didn't do well in that game. They were losing 10-0 in that game and had to come back. So that might cause them to refocus a little bit coming into this one. So I think Kansas City's in a bit of the better spot in this one. And then the public being on New Orleans to this degree still kind of confuses me because of the common opponent aspect of this. Kansas City beat Atlanta, and Atlanta beat, New Orleans. So the public apparently isn't looking at that and doing that transitive property handicapping in this one, I guess, where it seems like to me they'd be like, wait a minute, the Chiefs beat Atlanta, who beat New Orleans, so the Chiefs should probably win this game, right? But that's not what they're doing. I think they're looking at Kansas City's offense not scoring a lot this season and New Orleans scoring way more in a couple of their games and wanting the New Orleans offense instead. So I'm saying, dial it back a little bit on that. I do like the under a little bit more just because of all the offensive injuries that I mentioned throughout this video, man, on both sides. Saints cluster injury situation on the offensive line. The Chiefs, all those skill players on their offense are out. But the line's kind of reflecting it. It's gone down from 45.5 to 43, juice to the over. So I think pretty much the value is gone if you wanted the under at this point. So I would not want to play an under 43. I think it's going to get a little dangerous, but I don't really expect these offenses to be lighting it up in this one. And as I said, the Chiefs have a good defense. The Saints defense is actually fairly good as well. Kind of deceptively good because everybody was kind of paying attention to their offense. But even in their 2 losses, their defense actually performed pretty well. So I actually think both defenses are kind of the better units in these games, to be honest, especially on the Chiefs side. But with all these injuries on the offense, man, it could be more of a defensive game. We see, of course, a public over on a Monday night game. 75% of the tickets coming in on the over. I mean, it is still Mahomes against the Saints, so the public will play the over here, but it looks like 81% of the cash also on the over. Again, I would not want to be playing it over in this one. I slightly lean to the under, but at this price, I do not want to do it. So those are my breakdowns, man, for tonight's games here. Thanks for hanging out. Urzo, nobody else is left here, but those are the breakdowns. I don't have any plays today. We'll get back to it tomorrow. I'll probably have a play at some point. Let's enjoy the 3 games that we have on tap. We have playoff baseball and Monday Night Football tonight. I like Mondays, man, because it's always a shorter card. It's easier to kind of focus and find a spot, but I don't see an angle that I like in such a short card. Sometimes you just don't, so that's the way it is. I'm passing tonight, but have a good one, man. Peace out.